Financial Survival Network, helping you survive and thrive in the new economy. Go to CarrieLutz.com and sign up for 30 free micro trainings on financial survival.
1490 WGCH. This is Carrie Lutz. You're listening to the Financial Survival Network. Is there a Romney revolution? And what does it mean for individual rights? Yaron Brook of the Ayn Rand Institute for Individual Rights is here to talk about it. Hey, Yaron, welcome back.
Thanks for having me on again.
Hey, always great. And we're talking about the election. If you've listened to my show, I totally steer away from politics because to me, politics is not the answer and it's not the question. It's just another side of the problem. But we do have a nominee now in the Republican Party. What's your feeling about the so-called Romney revolution?
Well, putting revolution and Romney in the same sentence sounds ludicrous. The guy is really a mainstream, middle of the road, stand for nothing, empty suit. He doesn't have any principles. He doesn't really believe in anything. He's a pragmatic, business-oriented politician who wants to get stuff done, but really based on what? There's no principle guiding this. So there's no revolution. This will be very much politics as usual under Romney. He doesn't have a revolutionary bone in his body. The only advantage he has, from my perspective, is that he's not Obama. He's not Obama, which is a huge advantage, and that's why he'll get my support, I guess. But nothing much beyond that. Remember, Romney's the guy from Romneycare, which was the model for Obamacare. There's no accident he could win in Massachusetts, the most liberal state in the country. He's not really that different from liberals when it comes down to I think, his basic ideas, to the extent he has any. But I don't think he'll be quite as damaging as Obama is. And I think if the Republicans can hold on to the House, maybe even win the Senate, maybe they can steer him in kind of in a better direction. Maybe they can steer him towards less government and less interference in our affairs. But, we'll see.
Yeah, it's really kind of disconcerting because the opportunity was there. In my personal opinion, Obama is vulnerable, and with the right candidate with core beliefs, which I guess is kind of an oxymoron in itself, because most politicians don't have any core beliefs in this day and age, but the right guy could have cleaned the floor with him. And now we're in this struggle against evil, against not so evil.
Mediocrity. No, I agree completely. It wouldn't have had to be a candidate that the two of us would be excited about, but just a better candidate, just a candidate with some value, with some principles. Again, I don't expect a Republican candidate to agree with me on most issues. I'm too radical for them. I realize that. I'm too radical for the American people. Yeah. But, somebody who stands for something, a Paul Ryan, a Mitch Daniels, at least who have some kind of history of supporting limited government and reducing the size of government and increasing our freedoms, even if the record is not perfect, it would be far better than a guy, again, responsible for Romneycare, who really has shown nothing in his history to suggest that he understands what freedom or limited government even mean.
Yeah, and not to mention the history of failure, because his father was chairman of the American Motors Corporation that made some of the worst vehicles in the history of America, the Rambler, and such garbage that they put out on the market. And, I think we've got the American Motors of candidates right now.
Yeah, well, I don't want to. Romney's got enough against him that he doesn't need to bear the sins of his father as well. Hopefully he can muster enough ideas and he can muster enough energy and kind of a fighting spirit to go after Obama and to beat him. But I think it's going to be difficult for him. I think the election's going to be close. I certainly hope Obama's out of there. but it's not going to be easy. And you're right, Obama is very vulnerable. But it has to be somebody who can inspire. It has to be somebody with a positive message, a real message that inspires Americans towards more freedom, towards more limited government. And it's hard to believe Romney can be that person. Americans are ready to vote Obama out. They're ready to vote, I think, for an agenda of more limited government. But if they get a sense that this guy is just going to be another George Bush or just going to be another middle-of-the-road Republican, they're going to stay home. They're just not going to vote. They might not vote for Obama, but they just might not vote at all. And that'll be a tragedy if as a consequence of that, as a consequence of his inability to inspire people to come out and vote for him, Obama gets another 4 years.
Yeah. Well, it's really like the evil of the two lessers, as one of my college professors used to say. But what it means for individual rights, we've seen under Obama, as well as the prior administrations, regardless what party, an erosion of individual rights. We see the individual being pushed down under and becoming a vassal of the superstate, right? So if Obama
I think that's right.
Yeah.
In the left, I think right now with Obama and the Democrats as they're constituted today, that danger is far greater, I think, than what the Republicans pose. At least that's my assessment right now. I mean, the Democratic Party has moved, I think, dramatically to the left, to the woods of the progressive, egalitarian left. They care about equality, and they are a real danger. They're a danger to individual rights, to everything that is America. And what would have been great is a candidate that could really crush Obama and really crush his agenda and project the kind of confidence that is needed to start moving America in the opposite direction. I mean, I'm not under the illusion that we can get to where I would like to get, but at least change the direction which we're heading. I'm hopeful that if Romney wins and again, the Republicans maintain the House and Senate, maybe that moves us in the right direction. But what we've seen under Obama is a direct, massive assault on individual rights. His healthcare plan is an absolute disaster, which is going to destroy the best healthcare system in the world, the most innovative healthcare system in the world. And if only we could get a Republican to repeal that, it would be worth voting for a Republican.
Yeah, well, maybe the Supreme Court will put it out of Obama's misery and strike it down. But what my experience there is, you never can rely on the Supreme Court to do the right thing, because that's not their job necessarily. Their job, and that's part of the problem of our system, is a presumption goes into court ahead of any case that any action, any regulation, any rule or law passed by a duly elected body is entitled to a presumption of legality. And I don't know if that was always the case, but I certainly learned it in law school. And until you reverse that presumption that every government action, law passed is presumed to be unconstitutional and an expansion of governmental power, then the courts are really not going to save us.
I mean, I think that's part of the truth. I don't think the presumption is the real problem. I think the real problem is a lack of understanding of the Constitution, what it means and what its purpose is. And for too long, maybe for close to 100 years, the courts have completely misinterpreted the Constitution and not viewed it as what it is, a limitation on the job of government, on what government can get away with. So that every law passed by the legislature has to be qualified by, is it consistent with the powers enumerated for the federal government by the Constitution, or isn't it? And I think they have basically abandoned that principle, abandoned the limiting principle that is the Constitution. They have an opportunity with Obamacare to reinstate a limiting factor. It's a limited limiting factor, but at least it's something. And to say, look, the Constitution doesn't allow the federal government to do X, to mandate that you buy insurance. I mean, that's better than nothing. It's not as far as I'd like them to go, but it's better than nothing. But the problem is that they have 100 years of precedent that basically suggests that the federal government has no limits, because for 100 years the courts have misinterpreted the Constitution and misinterpreted its intention. And also, the other factor is that there is a real lack of understanding, and I'm being generous here, of what individual rights mean, of what that concept means, and why that concept is central to the Constitution. Because it's not mentioned explicitly in the Constitution, so people reject it. But if you understand the history and if you understand where the Constitution comes from, it's all about protecting individual rights. That was the purpose of the Constitution. That's why we have a Bill of Rights. That's why we have the Constitutions, to protect individuals from other individuals, but most importantly, to protect individuals from a government out of control. And that's what we have today, a government out of control.
Oh, yeah. It knows no bounds. It knows no limits. It pretty much can stick its nose into anything and everything in your life, from what you eat to how many gallons of water get flushed every time you pull the handle on your toilet, to whether or not you can smoke in the comfort of your own home. They're even getting into that. I don't know if you've caught this thing, Yaron, that happened in New York, but for years, for 10 years, this congregation had been sending their leftover food from major events over to a homeless shelter. And one day they get a call and said, sorry, can't do it because we don't know if it has too much sodium. Your kugel has too much fat. And God forbid you send over some chopped liver, man, that could kill these homeless people. These are people who are malnourished as a fact of life because they don't live in a structured environment where they get fed regularly, and a lot of them are mentally ill.
But Kerry, who are you to tell a government bureaucrat that they don't know what these people need? I mean, they're in charge of the stuff, not you.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, the perception is, that they run our lives, that they know what's good for us, that they are the bearers of the truth and good and social justice. And, of course, what they do time and time and time again, the consequences of their actions are always to hurt the people they supposedly are trying to help. But nobody cares, and they don't care. And it goes back to ideas, the kind of ideas that they tout, the ideas that it's okay to sacrifice some people for others, that people are too stupid to know what's good for them.
The greater good.
It goes back to the greater good and the myth of the greater good and the perverse perception of the greater good. And as long as we stick to that, we're going to get these people telling us how to live our lives and where to live it. And unfortunately, the Supreme Court should rule that all this stuff is unconstitutional. They would have to throw out most of the laws passed in the last 100 years. But, they can't do that. They because the country doesn't believe that. And this is why it all goes back to education. We get the politicians we deserve. We get the Supreme Court that we deserve. If we don't educate a new generation of voters, a new generation of intellectuals about the true meaning of individual rights, about the true purpose of government, about the true purpose of the Constitution, then we are doomed to continuously make these mistakes and to continuously, spiral ourselves down into the gutter, which is ultimately, I don't have a timeline, but ultimately where we're heading.
Yeah, there's no timelines for any of this. I've been through this discussion with dozens of people, and everybody has an opinion. No doubt I have an opinion. They're all going to be wrong, but education is certainly the way out. And a good thing is you're appearing on a lot of college campuses now, aren't you?
Yes, I'm actually speaking at NYU tomorrow night, and next week at Northwestern in Chicago. And so we're trying to do as much as we can on campuses. We've got a lot of clubs going. We also try to get to high schools and get them to read Ayn Rand in high school using her novels. So, and we've had an enormous amount of success, both in high schools and in colleges, in getting these ideas at least taught and in getting these books read. So, if I project out 10, 15 years, if the country doesn't collapse by then, in other words, if Peter Schiff is wrong, then we've got a real chance, I think, to turn things around. But it's going to take time. Education takes a long time, and ultimately the battle for real freedom, for for the kind of world we ultimately want to live in. That's a multi-generational battle. But we at least need to turn the ship around, at least, turn it away from the cliff, from the waterfall that we're heading towards, and buy us some time so that we can do more and more of this education. But long term, it's not going to happen in Washington. It's not going to happen in the Supreme Court. It's going to have to happen among the population. And to do that, we need to start taking over kind of the intellectual landscape. We need writers, we need radio commentators, we need television commentators. We need people who hold these ideas to be out there in the public, speaking on campuses, getting the books read in high schools, and getting these ideas to as many people, particularly young people, as possible.
Yeah, it's really essential. And the other form of education that's coming real soon is that these programs, all these egalitarian programs and this institutionalized charity, governmental charity, they're going bankrupt, and they're going to have to stop it or scale them back or really just confiscate all wealth to finance them. And when those programs really fail, that will be quite eye-opening, and it's going to be real difficult to blame it on we didn't have enough money. If only we could have printed more or taxed more, then it all would have worked out great.
But they're going to blame they're going to blame it on that anyway, right? I mean, they are, and the problem is if people are not educated enough, they will buy into it. I mean, there's never been an example of a civilization that's collapsed and gone, oh, okay, so more freedom is the solution. Let's do that. It's just never happens. Usually the collapse leads to totalitarianism, to some kind of authoritarian government that then dictates even more. A collapse is always, always, always blamed on bankers and businessmen and wealthy people and producers, and they're the ones usually killed first by the new authoritarian regime. So I'm not counting on the collapse, which I agree with you completely. I mean, all those systems you described are all bankrupt. I mean, basically, the United States government is bankrupt, and most states are bankrupt. I'm not counting on the fact that when that collapse happened, everybody will go, we get it. We're going to have to work really, really, really hard to educate them, to prepare them, to give them the intellectual tools to be able to see what was wrong and to be able to offer alternatives and make those alternatives attractive to people. So it's going to be a real battle even after the collapse.
Yeah, you're probably right about that. But there are people who are waking up now as we speak, and I believe that is becoming a wave, because how many people really have to wake up and understand what's happening before a movement takes place? Is it 5 or 10% of the people? You go back to the American Revolution, there were only about a third of the total population that supported the war for the country's independence, and yet they were able to prevail. So we need to build those numbers up. How big they have to be, I'm not sure, because most people don't really have a conscious opinion of the system as it stands now.
Well, I think that's right. And we have to dominate the intellectual sphere. We have to be able to present real ideas. We have to have the writers, the speakers, it really boils down to a battle of ideas. And, the founders, fortunately, didn't have to combat modern philosophy and its consequences and the inability of people to think. They lived within a culture that was already pretty healthy. I mean, even people who supported the British in those days were significantly healthier than I think Americans are today from an intellectual, philosophical framework. So I think our battle is far more difficult than what the founders had to deal with. And we're challenged by the fact that the enemy, and I mean the enemy, really the enemy controls the universities, the enemy controls most of the media, the enemy controls, all our educational institutions. So it's a real uphill battle. And I think what we have in our favor is technology. Your show is online. A lot of what I do to promote these ideas is online, and we're going to be doing at Diamond Institute a lot more of that in the years to come. I think the internet allows us to do things and to leverage ideas in a way that wasn't even imaginable even a few years ago. So I'm hoping we can really leverage that technology, leverage the internet to educate people and really have an impact and prepare them for the day when this country is bankrupt and offer real alternatives to how do we set things right.
Yeah, great point. And on that note, people wanting to learn more about the Ayn Rand Institute and your blog, and you've got a lot of different tools available on the internet. Where do they go?
AynRand.org, AYNRAND.org. You can also follow me on Facebook and just put my name in, Yaron, Yaron, Brook, Brook. And you can follow me on Twitter, ybrook. And just search Ayn Rand online, and you'll find huge amounts of resources that we have available.
Hey, it's great, and good travels there. Good luck getting the message across to a uncurious and just often muddled academic world that really doesn't have a clue. So
absolutely. Well, thanks, Gary. I appreciate it.
Hey, we'll talk to you soon, and you be well.
You too. Bye.
Bye.